There's someone in your life right now who cares about you deeply, who thinks about you more often than you realize, who genuinely enjoys your company and values your presence. And yet, if you scrolled through your entire message history with them, you'd notice something strange. They almost never text you first. Not once in weeks, sometimes months, and if you stopped reaching out, the conversation would simply go silent. Not because they forgot you, not because they moved on, but because something inside them makes initiating contact feel like one of the hardest things in the world. This video is about those people. The ones who wait. The ones who hover over the keyboard and then put the phone down. The ones whose silence is constantly misread as indifference. And by the end of this, you'll understand what's really happening beneath that quiet, and why it has almost nothing to do with how much they care. You probably know exactly who this person is. Maybe it's a friend you've had for years, who always responds warmly, who laughs at your messages, who shows up fully when you're together, but who never seems to be the one to start the conversation. Maybe it's someone you're dating, someone who lights up when they see you, but who leaves you wondering between meetings whether they're even thinking about you at all. Or maybe, if you're being honest with yourself right now, you are that person. You're the one who reads a message and feels a wave of relief that someone reached out. Because you wanted to talk to them all along, but couldn't bring yourself to make the first move. You're the one who has typed out a simple "Hey, how are you?" and then deleted it 4 times before locking your phone entirely. Think about what that actually looks like from the inside. You wake up in the morning, and a person crosses your mind. Someone you miss, someone you haven't spoken to in a while. You think about sending a message, just something small. But then a thought arrives almost immediately. What if they're busy? What if they don't really want to hear from me? What if the conversation dies after 2 replies, and I'm left sitting there feeling like I forced something that wasn't natural? So you wait. You tell yourself that if they want to talk, they'll reach out. And then hours pass. Days pass, and the silence grows into something heavier than it ever needed to be. Not because the relationship is broken, but because both people are waiting on the other side of the same hesitation. Psychologically, what's happening here is far more layered than simple shyness. At the root of this behavior is something researchers in attachment theory call anxious avoidant patterning, a deeply internalized belief that your desire for connection might be a burden to others. People who rarely text first have often learned, sometimes very early in life, that expressing a need for closeness can lead to rejection, dismissal, or discomfort. Maybe they grew up in a household where asking for attention was met with irritation. Maybe they had early friendships where they were always the one trying harder, always the one chasing, and at some point they made an unconscious decision: I will never be the one who cares more again. That decision doesn't disappear with age. It quietly embeds itself into every relationship, every interaction, every moment where reaching out feels like handing someone the power to confirm your deepest fear, that you are too much or not enough. There's another dimension to this that goes even deeper. It's tied to what psychologists call relational self-worth, the degree to which you believe your presence is genuinely wanted by others without external proof. People who text first easily tend to operate from a baseline assumption that they're welcome. They assume the other person will be glad to hear from them, and so the act of reaching out feels natural, even effortless. But for someone with lower relational self-worth, that assumption doesn't exist. Every message they consider sending must first pass through an internal tribunal of doubt. They don't evaluate whether they want to talk, they know they do. They evaluate whether the other person wants to hear from them. And because they can never be fully certain of the answer, they default to silence. It's not passivity. It's a protection mechanism so deeply automatic that most people who do it don't even recognize it as a choice anymore. And here's where modern life makes everything worse. In a world built on instant communication, where everyone is theoretically reachable at all times, the decision not to reach out carries more weight than it ever did before. 100 years ago, not writing a letter for a few weeks was perfectly normal. Today, not texting someone back within hours can feel like a statement. And for the person who already struggles to initiate, this awareness creates a paradox. The longer they wait, the more awkward it feels to finally reach out. What do I even say now? It's been too long. They'll think I didn't care. So the silence compounds itself, and what began as a momentary hesitation becomes a gap that feels impossible to bridge. They didn't intend to disappear. They just couldn't find a way back in that didn't feel like an admission of failure. What most people never see is the cost this pattern carries. On the surface, the person who rarely texts first might look independent, unbothered, even self-sufficient. But beneath that exterior is often someone who feels profoundly lonely while being surrounded by people who would welcome their call. They watch others maintain friendships effortlessly, sending casual messages and making spontaneous plans. And they wonder what's wrong with them. Why can't I just do that? Why does something so simple feel so impossibly heavy? The cruel irony is that their silence often produces the very outcome they feared most. Friends eventually stop reaching out, assuming the disinterest is mutual. Romantic partners start to pull away, interpreting the lack of initiation as a lack of investment. And the person who was waiting for proof that they were wanted now has evidence, distorted, self-fulfilling evidence, that they were right to hold back all along. There's a subtle grief that lives inside this pattern, a mourning for connections that faded not because of conflict or betrayal, but because of quiet. Relationships that ended in ellipses instead of periods. Friendships that could have survived if either person had simply said, "I was thinking about you." And perhaps what makes this so poignant is that the person who rarely texts first is almost always deeply loyal, deeply feeling, deeply invested in the people they love. They are not cold. They are not careless. They are hyper-aware, so aware of the social dynamics of every interaction that they become paralyzed by the very sensitivity that makes them such thoughtful friends in the first place. Their silence is not the absence of love. It is love filtered through fear, care distorted by self-doubt, connection trapped behind a wall that was built for protection but became a prison. If this is you, if you've recognized yourself somewhere in these words, then perhaps the most important thing you can hear right now is this. The text you're afraid to send is almost never as risky as it feels. The friend you're convinced has moved on probably misses you too. The person you assume doesn't want to hear from you has likely wondered why you went quiet. Your fear has been lying to you, not about the possibility of rejection, because rejection is always possible, but about your ability to survive it. You have survived every awkward silence, every unreturned message, every moment of social discomfort you've ever faced. And the truth is, the people who are meant to stay in your life will not be scared away by a simple "Hey, I've been thinking about you." They'll be relieved. Because on the other side of your silence, someone has been waiting too. The goal is not to become someone who texts constantly, who forces extroversion, who abandons their natural rhythm in favor of someone else's. The goal is to recognize that reaching out is not the same as imposing, that wanting connection is not a weakness, that the first message is not a confession of need, it is an offering of presence. And presence, freely given, is one of the rarest and most valuable things one human being can offer another. So the next time you find yourself hovering over that keyboard, composing and deleting, wanting to reach out but pulling back, consider what would happen if you just sent it. Not the perfect message, not the clever message, just the honest one. You might be surprised by what comes back. And if this felt like something you needed to hear today, Sit with it for a moment. Leave a thought in the comments if it resonated. And if there's someone who came to mind while you were watching this, maybe this is your sign to send that message you've been holding on to.